The building that you see in the picture there, known as the Revolution Hall Estate Building. It does not exist in its present form, but it played a significant role in the 18th century during Julian Fedon's time. For that building at one point housed troops loyal to Julian Fedon, and at another point, troops loyal to the British who were fighting against Julian Fedon. The building again has another additional significance, for the old Buchan, as we call it, was the building where many of us went to school. And we credit an American, Brother Melvin Shaper, for turning that old Buchan into a school. And many Grenadians in various parts of the world today are glad, happy that they were given the opportunity for a secondary education. I'll tell you a little more about that later on. So yes, the old Buchan was very important to many, many, many of us. So this year, the St. John's Christian Secondary School, popularly known as Shaper School, this year 2025, the school celebrated 60 years, the anniversary of the school. And many people who went to that school celebrated. There were events in Grenada to mark the 60th anniversary. And as the year comes to a close, as the year ends in a few months, will end in a few months, I think it is quite fitting for a little reflection, and to credit the one who opened that school, Brother Melvin Shaper. Some people call him Reverend Melvin Shaper, an American missionary, and his wife, Sister Joy Shaper. So at this point, or at this juncture, as one who attended the school would say, popular words we use, at this juncture. At this juncture, I'll tell you a little of the school. We sat on the hard rock benches at that school, which was located still there, but in a different form, for a new building exists. So we sat on the hard rock benches at that school, at the St. John's Christian Secondary School, Brothers, Grenada. The benches were so hard, boy, so hard. We sometimes had to put the pressure on one pega bam bam at a time. But we were away from it all, away from all the bustle and the hustle, all the noise. We were nicely tucked away in a remote spot at Brothers Estate, which was the past aboard of a cocoa buchan. There we nourished the brain and we fed the spirit. Ask my good friend, Vaughan and Louison. Friendships blossomed, and like a silk cotton tree, grew powerful roots. Then the branches spread to New York, to London, Toronto, and diverse places. We built a lodge-like relationship, but more than that, We became a family, a special Grenadian family. We were a family grounded on good principles. The school had a rugged start. There were those like Mr. Herman Hall, a teacher from the early days, who can spell out in great detail all the trials that existed when the school began. He will point out the conflicts and the roadblocks the established churches sought to put in the school's way. The school was a religious secondary school with a difference. Evangelical missionaries from the United States owned the school, and some of its policies set a new trend in Grenada. One such policy was allowing overage students to attend the school. It was those overage students who lifted the school to a level on par with the established secondary schools. I remember when I passed the school evening examination and my father took me up to Brothers, and Brother Shaper accepted me, put me in Form 2. But before that, a man who became the Governor General of Grenada, Sir R.O. Palmer, I remember the day he walked up Cooper Hill. He walked up and he told my mother that he had secured a job for me after I had passed the school evening examination, as he had secured a job for me in one of the firms in St. George's. But my mother told him that I was going to school at Brothers, and the rest is history, my history. But back to the school, one indication of imminent success came when Mr. Hall wrote a play that students performed, and even the Governor General took note, and Mr. Herbert Blaze. And Mr. Blaze saw the play and he said, from today, this school will be funded by the government of Grenada. One of Mr. Hall's students, Mr. George Wilson, was a fantastic story, had a fantastic story because he passed away. Rest in peace. His story, yes, many know it. He was painting the school, and Brother Shaper encouraged him to seek education. They had run out of paint, whitewash, actually. And while they waited on more to complete the painting, Brother Shaper invited Brother George Wilson to sit in the classes. He sat in the classes and he remained in the classes, became the headmaster, the principal of that school after going to the United States and attaining master's degree. Came back and became the headmaster of the school. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It is so refreshing to reflect on the Christmas time at the St. John's Christian Secondary School, when a cantata, musical Christmas hymns and plays the children performed, it echoed in the halls. The many voices rose in perfect harmony, engulfing the tranquil air with the inspiring songs. Today, many of us revert to those songs for further comfort when the times get rough and when our spirits sag. We sang those songs that we articulated with revival fervor and the revival spirit I felt. And I remember the time I preached some fiery sermons in the auditorium. Now to the buses. The buses streamed from Victoria and Guelph, Sautez, and St. George's with students, and the parents were happy for that. And they came particularly when we had our speech night at Shaper School. The time for other speeches. For some, it was a time for a big lime by a man called Kong, Mr. Kong, who had a shop. And we remember Miss Maiden shop, where some students didn't think too much of this. They didn't think too much of the speech night, for they found more happiness in liming by the shop. So the speech night for some was a time for old talk on the outside. But those of us who took the bus to school, boy, we had to be punctual. And this is where I learned discipline, because let me tell you something. When you get up in the morning and that bus leave you, you had to find your way all up to Brothers, more than 13 miles away. So those of us who took the bus, we had to be punctual. When Labor Reward and Teresa B, and I remember a guy called Dudley handling Labor Reward so well, and another man, Masters and Raymond, another guy. Boy, when they revved up the engines and prepared for the journey, and you were still looking for your books or your uniform, well, it was later for you. Bye-bye, Blakey. Then you had to hop a bus in the market, go to Guav, and walk up to Brothers, and hope to reach for the third or fourth period. What Brother Shape actually did too was many of the students in Guav and Sotes used to go to St. George's to go to school there. So the traffic came in one direction. Brother Shape had turned it around and the traffic went up to Guav to Shaper School. Masters and Raymond, mentioned before, who drove the big yellow school buses. You remember the big yellow school buses? Boy, when those buses came to Grenada, people bawled. They say, boy, Grenada road too small for those big buses. It was Uncle Gary that brought those big yellow school buses that transported students up to St. John's Christian Secondary School. So we had the big yellow buses and the smaller green ones, and a number of wooden buses that took children to St. John's Christian Secondary School. So when the buses were ready to make the move, you had to find yourself on the bus stop early. I recall a guy called Black Boy and Thompson, and of course Dudley, controlling the steering wheels of the wooden, well-ventilated vehicles. Yes, those vehicles were well-ventilated. And they drove those buses with such great skill. I thank Papa God for all the times we went up to the school and we were fortunate to reach without an accident. And when that accident happened, I think it was in 1991, a big stone came down near Kotomeri, some visit Cotton Bailey, and landed on a small bus, Greenleaf, I believe the name of the bus was, and killed those people. Boy, I sometimes pause and I thank Papa God and I say, that could have been us. Going up to St. John's Christian Secondary School, rain, thunder, and lightning, buses speeding through, passing sometimes the flooded waters of Bouchoujou to go up there to the St. John's Christian Secondary School. So I pause a time and I breathe a prayer, thanking Papa God. Now when the dismissal bell, and the bell rang at 3 o'clock, now hear this, it was another race for the bus. Some of the drivers, they had to rush to St. George's to pick up the passengers to bring back to Guelph and to Victoria. So they had time to wait for you. You better get on that bus as soon as the bell rang. Get on that bus. Because people knock off. We have words we say, they knock off at 4 p.m. in St. George's. So all of us, we had to race to go on the bus. It was a race for the high seat. Now everybody wanted to sit on the high seat. I don't know why they love the high seat like that. Well, I like it the way I loved it. The race for the high seat, and it was a race all the way up Marigot Hill and to St. George's. The bus rides were always fun, and there were always lots of laughter. The joy was multiplied if we closed our eyes and ignored the many steep hills and the sharp corners on the way. Really know how it was. Sometimes buses had to squeeze their way past each other. And when you look down, what do you think you saw? Precipice. Boy, you had to close your eyes. I remember how I used to quiver. Yes, when I looked down, and when I thought of the near misses. And again, I can only thank God for the protection He afforded us throughout the years. On a few occasions, we had to turn back after passing Happy Hill and reaching that flattened area in Beauchejou. The area was once lined with cane fields. Who remembers that? Beauchejou lined with cane fields on either side. Boy, one time, rain fell, bucket a drop. It was water more than flour, as the saying goes. So we had to turn around. Well, I remember an adventurous driver of a car. Well, he tried to venture forth. You know, his vehicle became a boat in the middle of the road. So going back and looking back, we have a lot to be thankful. I think sometimes we are not really thankful for a lot of things, you know. We have to pause sometimes and be thankful to God for our blessings. We like to dwell, some of us, on our sorrows. So we have to be thankful for a lot of things. We are thankful for the Grenada Boys Secondary School. I always say that, Those schools were instrumental. They helped propel the St. John's Christian Secondary School to the height it reached. The Grenada Boys Secondary School. I remember the time when we couldn't find an English teacher for the A-level. Brother Schaefer sent me and he sent two other students to sit with Mr. H.D. Baptiste of the GVSS so he could teach us in his house, to teach us so that we'd pass the GCE A-level examination in English. And Mr. Baptiste was one strict man where English was concerned. He had to pronounce the words right. I remember the time. I always tell the GBSS boys, you all at a school there and Mr. H.G. Baptiste taught you all in a school. I was more fortunate. I sat in his house and I got lessons from him, and thank God I was able to pass the A-level English examination. Yes, also we have to thankful for the Presentation Brothers College, the Anglican High School, and the other school connections that gave us brilliant teachers, man. Brilliant teachers. Brother Schaefer was smart. He looked around and he chose a lot of those intellectuals that were coming from GBSS and all the different schools. So what happened? We had brilliant teachers like Dr. Dunstan Campbell. Dr. Keith Mitchell became the Prime Minister of Grenada. Dr. Kenny Lewis. I can't forget Brother Sam. William Samuel. Brother William Samuel from Victoria. Miss Kathleen Peters, some Guave, product of the Anglican High School. We had a brother and sister Campbell. One was a lawyer, became a lawyer, and I think both of them died, Denise and Dennis, from Happy Hill. Miss Griffith, Carter mentioned her. Anthony Boson became a minister in the government. Mr. Fitzroy James, Miss Alice Henry from the high school, Miss Bernadette George, Mr. Cheese Lashley, I call him Cheese Lashley. He never felt bad about the name. And of course, Mr. Peter Thomas and others. Can't mention everybody, but there are some of the people. Just reinforce a point that the schools, the various secondary schools in Grenada, MacDonald College, teachers came from there, Mr. Adams, and others. Actually, Mr. Adams, I think he was a product of a GBSS. But they came to the St. John's Christian Secondary School. Yes, intellectuals. I cannot fail to mention Mr. Antoine, Brother Antoine, Algernon Antoine, the father of the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Why, he was one teacher, good in Spanish, and his class lessons were always exciting. He was fond of saying the word bulto, bulto, and raising his hands in the air. Oh, I remember that. None of us knew what he meant by that. In those days, the school helped each other. Just to say that again, the schools helped each other. We drew from one school to the other, and the intelligent teachers who participated. They all did human work that laid the foundation, that helped mold now accomplished minds, many accomplished minds, mathematicians and doctors and lawyers. I don't want to call names because I would obviously leave out people I should call. Now, we were grateful for the night classes. Brother Shaper came up with the night classes, and he put a big floodlight that lit up the whole pasture near the school. You see, he wanted to make sure that the night classes were held in the school, because some students might want to hold the night classes outside. So he wanted to be absolutely sure the students would not carry on their own night classes in the darkness of the pasture near the concrete strip. There's a concrete strip there for cricket. Who remembers the concrete strip? I remember the concrete strip. A certain teacher. You ever see a tall teacher, man, tall, bowling spin, and you see get a lot of taunting for that. Big tall man like you want to bowl spin. You should be coming down in fast bowling, man. Bowling fast. You're trying to bowl spin and you almost ended up busting your big toe with a cricket ball. Huh? That makes sense? And who remembers the American brilliant mind with a PhD? Mr. Robinson. Boy, he had a monstrous motorbike. He was a brilliant historian, but he was not too brilliant a biker. You know, the man gave me a ride once from St. George's, and when we reached Grand Roy, he started looking back to talk to me. I said, you know, let me hush him out there. The man looking back, he riding that bike and he looking back. I said, no, that happening. So I thought it prudent to refrain from speaking for the remainder of the trip. He taught German, and he had only a few ambitious souls in the class. I remember Jackie Miller, rest in peace, from Belmont. I attended his funeral recently. A superb artist. And he learned German so well. He was later speaking German with the tourists on Grandlands Beach. Now, Brother Shaper introduced the mechanic shop at the school. And when he did so, boy, everybody was wondering what further ideas Brother Shaper had in mind and would introduce. Because he realized that not everybody was cut out for the intellectual stuff, the academics. So he made sure that he brought other avenues for people to follow to engage. The mechanic shop was one. We had a philosophy class, and I was so glad that he came with the philosophy class, because one of the things that Brother Shaper, he said, you must think. Don't follow. Just follow. We see people just following without asking themselves a question. Think. Sift things. Weigh things. And one of the things I always remember him saying, get a view of the whole, the entirety. Look at things in its entirety. A view of the whole. W-H-O-L-E. But you know, some students, you know, their minds, when you say get a view of the whole, some people are thinking of other things, you know. I don't want to get into that. So the philosophy class, I'm glad that I did philosophy. And then Brother Shepherd taught us about a philosopher named Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T. Boy, people started to laugh because the word Kant, which you pronounce, sounded so much like a forbidden word Grenadians knew all too well. We had wonderful teachers who came later on. Again, I'm not going to mention names. I don't want to leave with anybody. But Ashepa introduced what was called the 10-point West Indian History Quiz. And by the way, Shepa School was the very first school to have the gong, the graduation gong in Grenada, the very first school. And people used to laugh at us. But when you look today, all over Grenada, the schools, the graduation ceremony are held, and people are wearing gongs. The students are wearing gongs, the graduation gongs. But they used to laugh at us when we wore the gongs. Yes, he introduced the 10-point West Indian History Quiz. Now, and Shepa School introduced the multiple choice, because the multiple choice, we were accustomed to writing essays, but he came with the multiple choice. Now, with a multiple choice, you either know it or you know it. You know, you can bramble a teacher by writing a whole long set of stuff, and then the teacher gets fed up and run a red pen, a line, take a red pen, and run a line through your essay. With a multiple choice, you have to answer the question, yes or no, all of the above, one of the above, and all that stuff. So yes, he introduced that. But he made matters worse, you know, by reading names of all those who got 0 in the examinations he gave. He used to stand in front of the class and he read out the names of those who, like cricketers, like West Indian cricketers today, failing to get off the mark. And I could still hear his voice. So-and-so got 0. So-and-so got 0. So-and-so got 1. Note a 10-point quiz in your tail. Now, the mechanic shop, yeah? Back to that. I strain a little there. But I'm coming back. I always come back, yeah? I like a barracuda. I just come back. The mechanic shop was a good idea, and some students gained valuable information about the intricacies about vehicles. Now, while some students were learning about cars, others were taught handicraft. He introduced handicraft. A woman called Dulcie McQuilkin, she taught handicraft in the early days at the St. John's Christian Secondary School. A space was made in the school's library to accommodate the students who were learning how to type. Well, we didn't have computers, so typing was a big thing. So Shepa School taught typing. And of course, the religious aspect. I remember the many sermons of Brother Bieber and Brother George, Brother De Silva and others. And with Brother Bieber, there was something especially I want to mention about a sermon he gave and mentioned about a boy who pounded a nail into a piece of wood. And he was asked to take out the nail. And he easily did that. No problem. He took the nail out. And then he was asked to take out the whole well, how you take out the whole? The lessons dealt with our actions and the scars that are left, even though we take corrective measures. I recall a student, you should call him Trop. Boy, he struggled in my English class. He once wrote about the time he tripped a Dracula. Boy, the class laughed, kiki kiki, for days. He tripped a Dracula. But then the GCE O-level exam rolled around. And listen to this, the advantage we had listening to the English commentators, the Roy Lawrence and the others who were very, very good in the language. So Trop told Cambridge something that he learned from a cricket, I think it was a cricket commentator. He told Cambridge examiner about the time the full-blooded shot that he learned from the cricket commentators. And he put the icing on the cake by telling Cambridge, the examiners, about the time he got the ball in a football game in front of the goal. And that was it. That was it. What a perfect air of finality for such an essay. Words in place, sir. Words in place. When the results came out and Trop passed English, boy, the laughter was wiped from many faces. Yes, so much to remember. And I think of a time when a Melbourne shaper brought a number of prominent people from Guelph to teach at the school. They included Mr. Francis of the Butter Shoe Store, Sir Carly Glean, Mr. Raleigh Bowler, father of Rosie, and an interesting gentleman called Mr. Well, the Jamaican word is Ira Crislow. We also had a Duncan fella from Guelph. He called himself the Joggis. And then there was a firebrand from St. George's called Lane. I think he passed away in Canada. Boy, that man almost set off a revolution in the school. He wanted to chase away all the white people. But it was during the time of the Black Power movement raging in America, so it had its effect in the Caribbean, and people followed the trend. Afro was big, and back to Africa and all that stuff. So this guy wanted to chase all the white people, chase them back to America. And then we had those who excelled in sports. Man, I sit and I think of the music classes. You think about music, man? We had teachers teaching music. And the piano was right there in the auditorium. But some students thought, well, music was a big joke. But they had the opportunity to learn music. I think later on, Beast, the Calypsonian, spoke about the piano and how he learned music at Shaper School. So some took it as a joke, but there are others, students who took the music seriously. And I know they are passing down information about all Mozart and Bach and Caribbean musicians. They're passing it down to the students, the children at this point. More on Brother Shaper and his ideas. Agricultural science was new. Dr. Dunstan Campbell, an intelligent man, introduced agricultural science as a new discipline. A man of numerous talents, again a product from the GBSS, And he showed many how to plant banana and cocoa in Brothers Estate, 13 acres of the estate. And I can still picture students with their big water boats. They planted corn in Brothers Estate, and sometimes the rat ate some of the corn. And they also acted as estate policemen, arresting students who unlawfully entered the farmed area. And such students were promptly brought to the principal. Dr. Kenny Lewis, a brilliant mind, a scientist, one of Grenadians' foremost scientists presently. Brilliant mind. Again, a product from GBSS. So when I tell you that we got help from other schools in Grenada, no joke. Dr. Kenny Lewis, he built up the chemistry lab all by himself. And he showed immense dedication, often remaining after school to aid students who sought his assistance. He too was a pillar of the school. Yes, there are so many things come to mind. We had a lot, or we still have a lot to remember. Yes, we had a wonderful time at the school. I recall the dedication of the students. Again, many of them today are happy that they went to the St. John's Christian Secondary School. I must say something also. I remember the time we sat at the St. Rose Convent in Guav to do the GCE O-level health science examination, health science. The exam was given. Boy, we were shocked. We were shocked. Nothing that we prepared was on that test. Students sat with sad, long faces, readily resigned to defeat, the ultimate failure. Boy, suddenly, the tension was broken. A fella I would not call his name, boy, he let go one thunderous one on a white like rattled the whole place. Rattled the whole place. You know what happened? Pen started to work. That jolted everyone to life. It ignited the intellect, our intellect. I remember Father Evelyn, the test monitor, he said, "That boy eats well, that boy eats well." Well, that was the same student. I'm not going to call his name. That was the same student who ran Sister Buck from the biology class when he changed the composition of the air with an odor similar to that of sulfur dioxide. So much to reflect on. Past students are happy that Brother Melvin Shaper gave them a second chance. Anthony Wendell the Riggs. A bit long, but I'm sure it is not boring. Picture of Brother Melvin Shaper, founder of the St. John's Christian Secondary School. Rest in peace. I must say that you did more than a lot of politicians. Someone said that, and I'm just quoting Anthony Wendell the Riggs.